Okay, so good evening, everyone. So today we have a very special session by Dr. Ritu. She is an MD dermatology pass out from AIMS New Delhi, and today she will be telling us something about dermatological emergencies and how to approach them. So without wasting any more time, I'll hand it over to Dr. Ritu.
So, hello everyone. I'm pretty surprised that people want to know about dermatological emergencies because emergencies and derma doesn't go together. But still, we have a few. We'll cover that. So, myself, Dr. Ritu Sharma, and I have done my dermat from AIMS New Delhi. And what all we'll be covering here today is SJS10, which is the major emergency that we see. Then erythema multiforme, which is not very serious issue, and DRESS, of course, DRESS, drug reaction eosinophilia with systemic symptoms. So we all know SJS is Steven-Johnson syndrome and toxic epidermolysis necrosis. So it is a scar. What is a scar? It is severe mucocutaneous adverse reaction. So some of the reactions are not severe, but this is classified as a scar. So scar may SJS10 is there, then we have bullous FDE, we have AGEP. So few more things are there. So when do we
Ritu,
call?
your slides are actually not moving.
Is it not moving?
Yeah, it's still not full screen either.
It's not full screen. Just wait. Hmm, I don't know. For me, it is full screen.
Okay, just try it. You know, selecting it, turning it down. Off and on again, मतलब exiting and coming back again. And now it's moving.
So should I move it like this only? Now is it moving? Still not moving, right? In my this thing
It
also it
says
is not.
now come to the SJS10 slide.
Yeah. Okay.
I can see your cursor moving, but slides are not moving for some reason.
Okay. So should I present it like in that manner only? Uh,
Uh, it might
in
be.
this way, it is moving. I think.
I guess it's not moving in the full screen mode. So I think you can
Yeah.
try it in the
There
other
it
mode.
is.
Now it's moving now, not moving in the full screen mode, I guess.
What should we do?
I think you can just do present it like this also. I think चल
Okay.
जाएगा.
Okay. ठीक है. So we have SJS, we have overlap of SJS10, and then we have 10. So if the surface area is less than 10%, we call it SJS. 10 to 30 is the overlap, and 10 is more than 30. So what is the cause of it? That we should know. It is mostly drug related, but in children, rarely it can be mycoplasma or cytomegalovirus associated. But definitely there is an HLA predisposition because not everybody is getting SJS10 from the drugs. So if you want to remember, then 1502 is associated with carbamazepine induced SJS in the Indian patient, and also allopurinol. We have seen a lot of cases of this allopurinol induced SJS10. So what all drugs are there which can cause SJS? First is anticonvulsant, followed by antibiotics. So anticonvulsant, we should take a history of carbamazepine, phenytoin, and then antibiotics, cephalosporins, fluoroquinolones, and other NSAIDs also can cause it. We have seen cases with naproxen, diclofenac also, and of course sulfonamide में cotrimoxazole is really important. So how does patient usually present? So they will usually have an initial prodrome, like they will have fever, URTI like symptoms. Then slowly they will have mucosa involvement, which will present as conjunctivitis, and there can be mild febrile illness, and they might be confused with some infective URTI. Followed by that, what they develop is mucous membrane involvement, and the initial mucosa is oropharyngeal, basically, followed by conjunctival, but any mucosa can be involved. And when do we call it SJS or 10 spectrum? When two or more mucosas are involved. Usually it is the nasal mucosa, oropharyngeal mucosa, and the conjunctival mucosa. So how does the lesion on the skin present? It is dusky erythematous macule. So macule here is very important because these are flat lesions. So they are flat. Sometimes they might have targetoid appearance. So here you see most of these lesions are flat, and look at the mucosa. The eye mucosa is involved, the oral mucosa is involved, and the nasal mucosa. Some picture with mucosa or some patient with mucosa involvement with this kind of flat, dusky erythematous lesion, sometimes having targetoid appearance, is usually SJS10. So this is how they progress symmetrically. They usually involve the upper part of the body first, and then later on they involve the proximal limbs, right? And slowly, what do they become? They become these confluent lesions which all merge together, and then they have this sheet. They peel off, the skin peels off from there. So this is how the frank picture looks like. So what are we worried about is the systemic symptoms of the SJS10. So since any mucosa can be involved, so there can be anything like painful micturition, photophobia, diarrhea, respiratory distress. Then thermoregulation is really impaired in these patients. And also, if we are able to identify the drug, if we are able to treat them, they really do reepithelize in a time of 3 to 4 weeks. And related to mucosa, we can have complication, but the most important is sepsis, since the skin barrier altogether is gone. So this is the most important complication, which is the cause of death usually. But apart from that, we can have distal complications like dyspigmentation, scarring, then synecdoche in the eye mucosa, and your vaginal mucosa. All those things are really important, like dysphagia, esophageal strictures. So do we have any predictor for mortality? Yes, this is the score that we usually do whenever the patient present within the 24 hours. This score has to be done and then repeated after 48 hours maybe, and then definitely 96 hours. So these are the poor prognostic factors. In Scotland, we have 7 things, right? So age more than 40, presence of malignancy, tachycardia, heartbeat more than 120, initial percentage of involvement if it is more than 10%, blood urea nitrogen, serum glucose, and bicarbonate. These are the levels. So we give 1 point to each, and then we calculate the overall mortality of the patient. What can be it? So if the score 10 is 1, you can see 3.2% mortality. But as we move towards the towards 5, more than 5 it becomes really 90, and it is very difficult to save such kind of people even in the highest possible available resources. So how do we manage? So management usually is prompt withdrawal of the drug. This is the most important step, I would say. If you are able to identify the drug and stop it on time, that can save life of the patient. And then you are emergency med people, you know how to manage ABCD and fluid, electrolyte, everything that I won't be dealing with in detail. So this is the algorithm for management, and first thing is prompt withdrawal of the drug, and rest everything else, the monitoring part and every other part comes later on, all the investigations and the supportive therapies. So how do we do this step, prompt withdrawal? First of all, you need to take detailed history. Obviously the patient won't be able to give the history of the drugs. Who are the people who have lived with the patient, right? Only those people know what all drugs the person was taking, what all was added. So what we used to do, we used to make a flow chart. So initially we used to make the center when the patient presented to us, and before, like all the drugs which have been changed in the past 8 weeks, and everything that happened after that. So you have to make a timeline in your record sheet. And then remember, even if you identify the drug, even if you stop it, even you have stopped all the correlated drugs also, but if the drug has longer half lives, we will have still continuation of the pathological process, and still there will be progression of the disease. And of course, sometimes it is very difficult to take the drug history, and multiple drugs would have been started altogether in a patient. So if that is the case, ideally you should avoid all the drugs that the patient has taken, and all the drugs which you suspect, and then make a timeline, and avoid same class of drug also. This is also really important. Avoid the same class of drug also. And we used to consult ID people for this purpose, key what all drugs can be given for all the antimicrobial coverage, and what all can be done. So initial assessment, you all know ABC, urinary output, everything. But what else is percentage of the body surface area involvement, because it is also there in your score 10 scores, right? And degree and extent and number of mucosa involvement is really important. You have to know how many mucosas are involved, because each mucosa requires a different kind of a care. So what is the extent of erythema and the epidermal detachment? So erythema is very important, because if any lesion has perilesional erythema, it is a sign of activity. You have to, what you can do is you can take a picture, you can mark the lesions with some pen or marker and look for the progression. next day when you come, and if you see the marker ke beyond the lesion has gone, it is a sign that it is still progressing and you have not maybe taken the history properly, or it is long half life wala drug. So this is a very important sign, and you should take the photographs also. So this is known as body mapping. So these are the supportive care you need to like ideally 30 to 32 degrees Celsius, and these patients usually require ICU setting. If not ICU available, then you have to take like at least have some isolation room setting, because one thing is prevention of the infection. Because the skin is gone, you need to prevent the infection, you need barrier nursing, which is very very important, and that can be done in an isolation room to reduce the chance of sepsis, because this is the cause of mortality in these patients, right? So what do we do as a dermat? Because ABC and all the emergency thing, electrolyte, everything is balanced by some other person, we need to monitor. If we have our own isolation room, we need to monitor the electrolyte and everything. But what we do for the skin per se, so you have to remember that any detached epidermis, if it is there, please leave it. Do not try to shear it off, because your skin is a natural dressing. This we say in burn also. If you got a burn, then leave your skin there only, because that is the best dressing. Then regular cleaning of wound, basically we tell the accompaniant to let them take a bath with normal saline, with saline compresses. It means you have to clean them, because that can be that can play a role in prevention of infection. Avoid sulfadizine, that because that can be absorbed, so please do avoid this. What you can do, you have to dress the a part where the epidermis is not there, basically the skin is not there. And what dressings are to be used? These are the dressing. Mepilex dressing is the one. This is a kind of foam dressing, basically. And this, if this is basically this is a costly dressing, so if that is not available, then this kind of paraffin gauze dressing can also be used. The purpose is these dressings do not stick to the wound, and it is very easily to remove. Suppose you have Mepilex, you need to wet it and then it pops out. So it is as simple, and the paraffin gauze dressing also doesn't stick to the wound, basically. So what about the oral mucosa and the ocular mucosa? See, we received a patient of SJS10. We saw it in the emergencies. We have to look to all the mucosa, what all mucosas are involved, and the ocular mucosa. So why this thermometer and this lignocaine gel? Because this thermometer ka distal end of the glass rod, apply this lignocaine gel over this part and break the synecdoche, break the adhesions of the eye, basically. So if you're not doing this on time, you are letting the patient to have scars for lifetime and even blind. The person can turn blind for life. So break the adhesion with this. So you need to just apply lignocaine jelly on this thermometer, and you need to insert it between the two conjunctiva and try to break the adhesion gently. Right, this should be done. And similarly, if you see there are vaginal mucosa adhesions, please break them also. And then what about oral mucosa? So these are the chlorhexidine mouthwashes. If patient is able to do, well and good. And at least on the crusting part, you can apply this triamcinolone paste. And if that is also not possible, at least saline crust. I mean saline compresses are to be kept on the oral mucosa and the lips, or everything which is crusted. Please keep saline compresses, and they really help with removal of the crust. And for eyes, we can on our part we can use refresh eye tear drops, and if we need subsequent advices, you can always take it from the ophthalmologist. So it is a multidisciplinary case, basically, but these are the basic things that can be done by anybody. So do we need a treatment? Yes. If the patient is presenting in the early phase of the, within 72 hours of starting of the SJS10, then there is a concept of giving corticosteroid, systemic corticosteroid, 1 to 2 mg per kg of prednisolone can be given. If you are not able to give it orally, then give IV Dexa, right? IV it can be given. And you have to assess daily, you have to assess the perilesional erythema, the body map, the images that you took, if there is skin tenderness, if there is progression. If it is still progressing, then please take the history again of the drug, which was the drug which has not been stopped, right? And thereafter, if the patient is presenting after 72 hours, there is no point of giving the steroid. We are just delaying the healing. in this time. So please do not give it, and let the supportive management be given to the patient. Like all other things are to be done, and these are the other things, like if you are able to give steroids, then you can give, suppose the patient is in sepsis, what to do next? You can always give IVIG. Some people give cyclosporin also, but everything is tapered very quickly in these cases. Maximum 7 to 10 days is the time. Like we usually used to taper within 5-6 days, right? If you're giving steroid, within 5-6 days it has to be tapered and stopped, because otherwise you are delaying the healing of the patient now if you're giving it for a longer time. So these are the IGDVL guidelines which I'm showing you. So I hope it was clear. Then next is erythema multiforme. So this is not something emergent condition, but it is mimicker of SJS. When you have SJS, less than 10% body surface area is involved. So this is a mimicker of SJS. So in SJS, the patient won't be stable. There will be high grade fever, there will be malaise, and SJS usually start from the face and then progresses downward. But erythema multiforme has two classical things. First is absence of prodrome. Second, there is not drug history. What can be the history? There can be history of herpes. So patients can be young adult with history of herpetic lesions in the oral mucosa, and then they develop some targetoid lesion. And talking about the mortality, no, there is no mortality. You can absolutely save them, and it can heal on its own also. What are the lesions? So these are the classical lesions which we see in erythema multiforme. They can be mucosa involvement. Obviously, if the person had oral herpes, there can be mucosa involvement, because they are herpetic lesions usually, right? And these are the classical lesions. We usually find these such lesions, classical target lesions, are seen on the palm and soles of the patient along with the mucosa involvement, and less than one mucosa will be involved, usually the oral mucosa along with such lesions. It is erythema multiforme. There is nothing to worry. If you feel the herpetic lesions are still active, it is 1 or 2 days, you can always give a course of acyclovir. If you feel the lesions are progressing, you can even add steroids. Oral steroids can be added. But the problem with erythema multiforme is it recurs. It is a recurring disease. So immunosuppressants are the next line of therapy in those cases, if that is the case. Now coming to this thing, what is this? This is DRESS, drug reaction, eosinophilia, and systemic symptoms. So it is a severe hypersensitivity reaction, and it also occurs after medication, basically, because the metabolites of the medications are not being processed nicely, and there occurs T type of hypersensitivity reaction, T cell mediated. So the culprit here also are aromatic anticonvulsant like phenytoin, carbamazepine, phenobarbital, and sulfonamide like Dapsone. We call it Dapsone hypersensitivity syndrome. These are the most frequently associated drugs, and most often it is carbamazepine. This is the common offender. Not just this, the normal drugs like NSAIDs can also cause, and this allopurinol, and sometimes like we have seen many cases of anti-TB drugs. They are also the culprit, because we used to see anti-TB drug cases and also NSAID cases we used to see. So not the rare drugs, not only carbamazepine, we had an alert with this meftal also causing DRESS in the patients, right? So how do these people present? It is like somebody started taking a new drug, and usually it is 2 to 6 weeks of interval when they develop the symptoms, right? What are the symptoms? But if somebody has taken the drug and they just suddenly stopped it, and again they are taking, then on re-exposure, this interval is shortened, right? So there will be low grade fever, or sometimes people do develop high grade fever, febrile illness also. And after that low grade of fever, myalgia, people do develop these maculopapular eruption along with lymphadenopathy, right? And some very little mucosa involvement is there. We used to say almost none, but yes, we have seen only crusting of the lips type of lesions. So this is followed by what we are worried about in DRESS is, since it is eosinophil mediated destruction of almost all of your organ, and most common being liver. So these patients usually have a systemic involvement that forms the criteria of diagnosis. So if we talk about the dermatological skin related manifestation, these are the maculopapular lesions, and this sign like swelling of the face, swelling of the hand, of the feet, along with the maculopapular region with a mild prodrome. This is very classical. This facial edema is very classical for DRESS. Suppose we are suspecting, these are the actual images. Look at the face, it is actually swollen, and look at the lips also. The crusting part is still there. And look at the maculopapular eruption. These are the resolving eruption. We have seen like scaling is a sign of resolution. So we can see scaling. So, but he has it over the palm and soles also, and some edema is also there in this patient, right? So these were the images sent from home by somebody. So look at these lesions. These are maculopapular lesions. These are not like tan. They do not have that reddish, dusky erythematous, and they are actually elevated lesion, maculopapular we call it. And look at this. Now it is scaling off, right? Now it is peeling. Now, what are the systemic involvement that we expect in a case of DRESS? Major, that is the cause of major morbidity and mortality. First of all, most common systemic finding is fever, more than 38 degrees Celsius, and any viscera can be involved, hepatic system being the most common, followed by renal, pulmonary, cardiac. Every manifestation can be there. Late manifestation can be of endocrine dysfunctions, but this is very common. Lymphadenopathy. If you have maculopapular rash with facial edema, cephalocaudal, and if you see there are lymph nodes, you have to suspect DRESS, and then you have to diagnose it like with some investigation to be as a case of DRESS, right? This is seen in 75% of the cases, and most common being cervical, axillary, and inguinal. So what are the suspected drugs? You can, like, if somebody has developed because of ampicillin, cardiac involvement is common, carbamazepine, renal involvement is common. So this is the association in this table. So how do we diagnose? We apply something known as Registrar. This is most commonly used. Registrar is the system that we use to diagnose it. So other scores are J-scars and Bouquet et al., but most commonly is Registrar. So this is the Registrar scores. There are multiple things which we need to see, like fever, enlarged lymph node, eosinophilia, what is the value of eosinophils, atypical lymphocyte, eosinophilia, and skin rash involvement suggestive of DRESS. If you have some confusion, you can even go for a biopsy, but not usually required. And the organ involvement, if somebody has transaminitis, renal function impaired, lung, muscle, heart, any involvement, right? So if the final score is more than 5, then it is a case of definite DRESS. But if the score is 4 to 5, then also it is a case of probable DRESS, and you should treat the patient in line of DRESS because you most likely have eosinophilia or atypical lymphocytes, right? And the rash suggestive of DRESS. Now, mandatory evaluation, what we used to do was obviously drug history, stop the drug, history examination, skin ka, then CBC. Like you want to find whether the patient has eosinophilia or not, and the peripheral blood smear to look for atypical lymphocyte. These are the investigations. Suppose you have somebody with maculopapular rash and you had a lymph node also by chance. Now you are suspecting that the case is of DRESS, then do this. Take the history of drug, make that chart again, then do CBC, look for the eosinophil count, get the peripheral blood smear done to rule out atypical lymphocytes, right? Then absolute, and you can do simultaneously LFT, RFT, blood electrolytes also. We never used to do USG abdomen. If indicated, if you find that transaminitis is there, then if indicated, you can go for other investigations. Otherwise, not really required. So this is how you confirm the case with Registrar, and then you admit the patient. And first step always is immediate withdrawal of the culprit drug that can be just by taking the history, which is very, very important. And then your part, ABC, thermoregulation, nutrition, and everything you have to take care. And suppose you did not find any systemic involvement in the patient, but you still suspect that it is a DRESS case. You do not need to give systemic corticosteroid. Just wait. Just give the patient topical corticosteroid. Just give them some antihistamine. Just give them proper diet, nutrition, look, and monitor if the patient is worsening, if he is developing transaminitis, if the KFT, RFT, or anything else is happening, if anything is getting deranged, that can also be the option. But suppose he has systemic involvement, then you have to give steroids basically in this case also, right? But in this case, the steroids required are for very long term because we have complications like hepatitis, like acute interstitial nephritis, interstitial pneumonitis, autoimmune thyroiditis, and type 1 diabetes also can be a complication. So we need to look for them for a very long time. And also the steroids are to be given at least for 3 months. We have given it for 7-8 months also to the patient, right? So this is the timeline. Suppose you develop a rash. So this is FDE. This is very different from the, maculopapular exanthum. This is not the case. That usually develops in 1 day. Suppose maculopapular exanthum you are suspecting. So that usually happen within 1 to 2 days of starting of a new drug, right? And then dress happens 2 to 8 weeks, usually 2 to 6 weeks after starting of the new drugs. And then what about SJS10? That happens usually 2 to 6 weeks after starting of the, within 6 weeks of the starting of the, new drug. So this is how we can actually calculate what can be the pathology and whether it is maculopapular exanthum or is it going to be a dress case, and obviously the diagnostic criteria you will have to apply. Suppose there is drug induced and viral induced. This is also a very common confusion. Suppose the patient has viral like features, pharyngitis, conjunctivitis, and he's developing a maculopapular exanthum, and he's taking a new drug also. So this is always a diagnostic dilemma. These are only the soft pointers. This is really a difficult nut to crack. So usually we say that viral induced thing will have fever, conjunctivitis, all the associated signs of viruses, and these things are non-pruritic. And with pattern, we say that viral induced exanthum are cephalocaudal. But in drug induced, they are not cephalocaudal. Obviously, they will be pruritic. We have seen patient itch a lot in drug induced cases, but since we usually give them emollient antihistamine, that cannot be very apparent. But yes, they are said to be pruritic because the pathology is eosinophil induced, right? And also facial edema is a very good sign for drug induced maculopapular exanthum, and haphazard distribution is there in drug induced, whereas in virus it is cephalocaudal. And obviously drug induced, we saw dress 2 to 6 weeks, within 7 to 10 days. There is no such thing in viral. If you feel that it is virus and viral prodrome is there, just wait and watch, and let's see if it is actually frank virus. If it is resolving, you can follow it up basically. So this was all. Thank you. If you have any questions or queries, we are open to that.
So thanks, Dr. Ritu. I think that was a very, very nice presentation, and even I learned a lot just listening to that. So it was very nice and concise for us. So I think one thing that we'll mention is that I think dresses are much more common than we think. I think it's more common than SGSTN, is it not?
Yeah, dress is more common, correct.
Because generally, I think a lot of people have heard of SGS10, not that much of dress.
But we do used to see a lot of cases of dress. Yeah, correct.
So if anybody has any doubts, you can either type it out in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask also now.
Okay. So I can see a few questions. How do you approach fluid resuscitation in SJS10? Do we follow Parkland or is there any other? Yeah, we follow Parkland only. We follow the same protocols. Parkland only is followed.
So basically it's like burns.
Yeah, it is like burns only. Correct. How to differentiate SJS versus pemphigus vulgaris? Suppose we didn't know about the drug history. Yes, SJS versus pemphigus vulgaris is not confusing, I would say, like maybe for you, but as a derm, these are two different cases. So pemphigus vulgaris doesn't happen that quickly. SJS is dusky erythematous. I'll show you the pictures again. So what we saw was it is dusky erythematous flat. How would I explain? These are not the lesions of pemphigus. These are purplish, dark red color ka flat lesions which have developed simultaneously, and suddenly there was involvement of mucosa and oral lesions. What can be the differential diagnosis of this case is paraneoplastic pemphigus, but only because the mucosa is involved. These type of lesions can be seen in paraneoplastic, but only a dermat can tell you ki whether it is paraneoplastic or SJS10, but it is SJS10 basically because of this. Look at the spread. It was very sudden spread, and this pemphigus lesions are usually bullous lesion. They will have some fluid filled in between. Look at this. There is no bulla. It is flat lesion. So flat lesions are seen in SJS10, purpuric flat lesions. This is how they are. If you want a closer look, see. these are all flat, and suddenly after confluenting, the skin will peel off like this. Pemphigus, I'll show you pictures. There are bullous lesions basically. There are bullous lesions. You will be able to make out that there was something, there was a bullae and then it ruptured, and over it the epithelium is lying. So all these stuffs will be seen. And pemphigus is slowly progressing. And we need to take drug history because obviously pemphigus can also be drug induced, but the history is very different from this one. This is very rapidly progressing, and look at the mucosa involved. Such drastic mucosa involvement all of a sudden after taking drug, and flat lesions again, I would say dusky erythematous. Hmm. Routine antibiotic indicated for secondary bacterial infection or only if signs are present. So suppose you have pus filled lesion on the skin, it is foul smelling, you are suspecting that it can be infected lesion, send a skin swab basically. But if you want to give something for routine, that yes, we have to consider that the patient has SJS10 to some antibiotic or not, and if it is really needed or not. Otherwise, we have KMNO4 bath also, which is known as Condy's bath. So what is that? We take KMNO4 crystals, we just dip it in a bucket of water, and then we just take a bath with it. Or compresses can also be done. That also has good antiseptic role basically. But yes, routine antibiotics are not indicated. If you are suspecting bacterial infection, then you have to, and usually these people won't have skin ka bacterial infection. The infection focus must be somewhere else also. So they do land up in sepsis because of involvement of other organs basically. You have to find the focus of sepsis then. So yeah. So that is how it is.
Another one I think I wanted to ask, since a lot of exam going people are here. So what
Okay.
is the difference between the Nikolsky sign and pseudo-Nikolsky sign? Examiners love to ask these kind of things.
Okay. So Nikolsky sign is usually, see, what happens in 10 is basically there is necrosis of the epidermis. The epidermis has been eaten away, so there is no support to it. So when you apply a shear force, that will be rubbed off, like it will peel off like this. So this is known as pseudo Nikolsky, because we prefer to say Nikolsky only for bullous disorder because it was described for those conditions. So that is how it is different. Nothing other. Bullous disorder may we have defect in the desmosomes, right? So that is the cause, that there is fluid is getting filled and then it is getting separated from the skin, like the skin is shearing off. So that is how it is. Since the pathology is different, they try to call it differently.
But basically, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. The skin is just shearing off.
So I think I really enjoyed this session. I think we should definitely do another one. I think we have a couple of topics left. I think for pemphigus we can do it in another session, and urticaria.
Okay, pemphigus. Okay. That's a big topic. Okay, we'll
Yeah,
do pemphigus. We'll see the images of pemphigus. Okay, no problem.
maybe
Okay.
pemphigus
Okay, yes.
versus bullous
Other
pemphigoid.
colleges, pemphigus is handled in emergency and medicine department, right? So maybe that is why. Okay.
Uh, and urticaria also. Sometimes you get these it's
Huh.
really difficult to manage cases of urticaria also sometimes.
Okay, we'll discuss urticaria also, no problem. So, what are other dermat emergencies expected in EM exams? So, I don't think I know the answer to this. Mehul can answer. So,
Yeah, that kind of depends on what kind of cases come to your hospital. So I cannot really tell that either. So for us, it's like basically what Ritu discussed today, and plus we had, I think in our hospital, we have a lot of cases of systemic sclerosis. So
oh,
we had a lot of some cases of that also.
yes.
But that really doesn't really come under
Hmm.
emergency medicine per se, but we did have that for our exam. A lot of it depends basically on what kind of patients come to your hospital.
Right. So, I will share the link of the basically the articles if you want to read. Uh, Just wait. I'll share the link of the articles, full text, if you want to read about the guideline and management protocols. Let's see. Or maybe I can share it to you because my network is not
Yeah, you
working
just share it to me.
properly.
I'll just share
I
it with them.
found.
That's fine.
Okay.
And there is one more doubt actually by Dr. Vishnu.
I, yeah.
What precaution would you take during basic procedures like IV access, BP curve, ECG leads in a 10 patient?
Yes, so measuring BP is really a difficult task. You can apply the Mepilex foam dressing initially, or if you do not have the lot of gauze, the cotton pads we used to apply, and then only we used to measure the BP. And IV access, then we have to get the IV access anyhow. So you need to be, as gentle as you can. Do not touch their skin a lot because it will just get separated. So just do not touch and just try to insert it very gently. BP we used to measure with cotton pads surrounded. Yes, or Mepilex foam dressing or paraffin gauze dressings, that all. See, ECG leads have to be pasted. You can't do much about it, basically. So, ECG, get it done only when needed, I would say. So, some things are to be done. So, if that is the requirement, just BP is like measured in this way because that is the routine thing. Anything else?
I think that's all. I think most of them have got their questions answered, I think. So thank you again, Dr. Ritu. This was a great session.